Good morning and welcome to our service, part of the CUC Summer Sunday Service series. My name's Marilyn Chenier and I'm your service leader for today. I will be assisted by Jessica Friesen, the music director of our congregation, the Universalist Unitarian Church of Halifax. It's amazing the work that Jessica and John put into this behind the scenes before we pull it off on Sunday morning. Reverend Norm Herofker is our minister and Marie-Claude Leroux is our director of religious exploration. They're both on leave for the summer with regular church services and the RE program starting again in September. John Piccolo is our very valuable volunteer technician. Our service is entirely virtual, with sections happening live here in Halifax and other sections being part of a video from the Unitarian Church of Edmonton. Today, during the service, the chat function will be open and I invite you to extend our hospitality by saying hello to anyone that you do not recognize. I want to introduce you to people who are online but haven't turned on their video for safety concerns, which is another story I'll tell you someday. But I'm very excited that Clement and Sylvie have joined us today, thanks to technology, from Africa. We are very excited to be sponsoring them to come to Halifax as refugees. You're going to see that today's service is about genocide in part, and both Clement and Sylvie experienced genocide as young children and all the awful stuff that happened after. Though not a minister, Clement started a Unitarian church in Rwanda, and for his activism was kidnapped and tortured. So he and Sylvie eventually had to flee Rwanda with their two young sons, Nolan and Sydney. You're going to love them, our first UU refugees, and they will be part of our church. So do say hi on chat. If any of you are not receiving our UU info notifications and would like updates, please send an email to president@uuch.ca. The order of service for today was sent out yesterday with details of the service and announcements. I know that you are able to read the announcements and probably did, but I just want to bring your attention to two that are new. Reverend Norm and Janet are finally cuddling their granddaughter in Ontario. They will be away from July 25th to August 5th. And so in that time, for any urgent matters, you can contact Margaret at president@uuch.ca or Sylvia, Sylvia Mattinson, who you will find in your directory. The other new announcement is that the deadline for submissions for the very, very brief August newsletter is tomorrow, Monday, the 27th. You can email Etta Ham if you have anything to submit or any questions. Given that today's service is about genocide and that Reverend Brooks will speak shortly about the Red Dress Project and the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, let us acknowledge that there has been genocide in Canada. Both the residential school system and the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls give evidence to that. And now Jessica will bring us into the sacred space of community with the prelude. now we will light our chalice as we do each Sunday, signifying the beginning of our service. I will read the words as Jessica in the church sanctuary will light the chalice. I hope you're ready to light your chalices at home. For today's service, we'll use the same words as UCE used in their service. We light this chalice, symbol of our purpose, to bring more love and justice into the world. We light this chalice, knowing we are dispersed across the world, not bound by walls, but connected through the web of life. And now Jessica will play the opening hymn, Let There Be Light.
Good morning, everybody. So I got a list of hymns from Maryland, actually, that really fit into this topic we are discussing today. So let there be light. Let there be light. Let there be understanding that all the nations gather. Let them be face to face. So please sing along. I want to hear your beautiful voices. Soon we'll be in the sanctuary together, and then I can actually hear it. So please sing along. Let there be light. Let there be understanding. Let all the nations gather. Let them be face to face. Open our lips. Open our lips, open our minds to ponder, open the door of concord, opening into grace. Perish the sword, perish our angry judgment, perish the bombs and hunger, perish the fight for gain. Let there be light. Let there be light. Open our hearts to wander. Perish the way of terror. Follow the world God made.
Now let us celebrate the ritual of the offering. Our offering presents us with a time of ritual, a time to celebrate the importance of generosity in leading a good life, and you, the congregation, have responded again and again to this call. In this trying time, your generosity has really been amazing. You've kept our Saturday brunch and food box programs going, and many of you gave unpledged donations, just knowing that our income will probably be down. Thank you so much. As we were learning how to do all this online, we stopped Share the Plate, but we will probably start it again in the fall. But I know that at this time, many of you are contributing as you are able to the many efforts addressing social justice issues right now. If you also want to donate to us, we will gratefully receive it. And you can do this by an e-transfer to moi, treasurer@uuch.ca. If you prefer to do it by check, please use the church address. Now it's time for joys and sorrows. This is a sacred time in our service, a time that is set apart to honor the many sorrows and the many joys that you, the congregation, are living, and to acknowledge the mutual support of our community. Jessica will be lighting the candles for us in the sanctuary, and today I would ask her to start by lighting one for all the sorrows that go unspoken, the large ones perhaps exacerbated by the pandemic, and the small everyday annoyances. I would then ask her to light one for all the joys of every day, the big ones no pandemic can diminish, and the small everyday ones. We didn't receive any other messages to add to today, so in conclusion, may the joys and sorrows, both those acknowledged and those held in the silent sanctuary of our hearts, weave us together in the fabric of community. For next week, anyone who wants to share a joy or sorrow can relay that ahead of time by email to the service leader for the week or to Sylvia Mattinson. And later this morning, when we stop the YouTube streaming and before the coffee hour begins, we will invite anyone else who has a joy or sorrow to share to raise their hand and do so. Okay, so we are ready to join the Unitarian Church of Edmonton for their Sunday service. It may seem a little bit disjoint because it was 90 minutes long with multiple speakers, and we have had to cut and paste. We will be breaking between their speakers for readings and our own music with Jessica, and we will conclude the service with chalice extinguishing and a closing hymn. Audrey Brooks is going to introduce herself shortly, but I wanted to add a few words. I've known Audrey since I joined the UCE in the mid-1980s. She became an ordained UU minister, but her focus has always been on community ministry. She was a chaplain at the University of Alberta. She's always been a raging granny and always available to UCE when needed. And some of you may remember her as she came here for Helen McFadgen's ordination. So now we will go to their video and the first theme of Witness.
My name is Reverend Audrey Brooks. I'm the chaplain at the Unitarian Church of Edmonton, a board member of the Edmonton Interfaith Center, two sponsors along with the Canadian Unitarian Council of this memorial service. It is 12 years since I initiated the Genocide Memorial Service because violent deaths happen all over the world, and we must have witnesses against them. We cannot stay quiet and let it continue. It is a practice used to dominate and persecute ordinary people trying to lead ordinary and safe lives in their own countries. So each year we hold this service to honor the dead, witness to what happened to them, and place stones with names on them in the memorial garden where many people visit and stop to pray. You saw on the first slides a gathering in one of the first memorial services, several people coming together to pray, to witness, and to share stories about what was happening in their own countries. Jamie Black of Winnipeg brought her Red Dress project to the University of Alberta several years ago to honor the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls of Canada. I was chaplain there at that time, and I walked out into the winter snow, and I saw all of these dresses hanging all over the place. They were on fences and on banners and in hallways. Her work has inspired other groups to continue the project in many locations. Just recently, I received pictures of a museum in Lac La Biche, Alberta, where the red dresses were displayed. So it continues. In the larger context, I include this slide to recognize and act as witness to the millions and millions of girls and women who are deliberately murdered worldwide. This van accompanied the missing and murdered women and girls march from Vancouver to Ottawa a few years ago. And I was called and asked if we would host them while they were having their van prepared. It needed some work on it before they could start out again. So our church hosted them. And it was quite an experience to their mothers and grandmothers and elders and young teenagers. I was absolutely amazed at the power and the commitment of these people to make it all the way from BC to Ottawa to stand as witness before the legislature there for the missing and murdered women. This is a stone that appears in the Genocide Memorial Garden. And as you can see, it says, "Humanity stands in a river of its own blood." That is a quotation I found, and I could never find the author of it. But it certainly says what I want to say. This garden honors the memory of victims who died violent deaths because of wars, racism, religious persecution, sexual orientation, greed, slavery, ethnic cleansing, and appropriation of Aboriginal lands. And I have to tell you that people come to that garden and they stop and they read it. Very, very often they pray. Sometimes they talk with me. So it's been there since 2009. There are Stanton's 8 stages of genocide. We have to ask, how do we affirm that all people in the world have inherent worth and dignity, have a right to freedom, safety, and the right to a decent life, when in every country there are those who would deny billions of our human family this right? Stanton declares that there are 8 stages of genocide. And we see this rising among us today. Unfortunately, history repeats itself. People are labeled according to race, religion, sexual orientation, political belief. They are assigned negative symbols. We know about the yellow star and the pink triangle. We know that they're called terrible names, like rapists and murderers, as happened with refugees and GLBTQ people across the world who are escaping persecution by becoming refugees in other countries. People are incited to hate each other. Hate groups are encouraged to attack and abuse them, even in countries that are supposed to be liberal and democratic. I heard on the news this morning that the Chinese are being vilified for the COVID virus, vandalism and abuse on the streets. And this is Canada, folks. This is Canada. Governments are making laws they say will protect the state and the economy, and they use military and police forces to jail, torture, and murder masses of people, and then deny that they're doing it. They destroy families by separating them from their children who are jailed and the parents deported. Terrible acts of violence against helpless people are justified. We gather here today to affirm that there is a blood tie among us, and it must lead us to resist abuses of power. We already know that any form of violence to one of us, wherever we live in the world, is an assault on all of humanity. It doesn't matter if it's happening over there and is overkill in terms of information from the media, so we kind of get used to it. This service is one step forward each year that challenges us to speak out from our positions of faith and never stop challenging power that has as its goal the destruction of life and devastation of land, just because they can.
Still on the theme of witness is this poem that was read on the UCE service. The Diameter of the Bomb by Yehuda Amichai. The diameter of the bomb was 30 centimeters and the diameter of its effective range about 7 meters, with 4 dead and 11 wounded. And around these, in a larger circle of pain and time, 2 hospitals are scattered and 1 graveyard. But the young woman who was buried in the city she came from, at a distance of more than 100 kilometers, enlarges the circle considerably, and the solitary man mourning her death on the distant shores of a country far across the sea includes the entire world in this circle. And I won't even mention the crying of the orphans that reaches up to the throne of God and beyond, making a circle with no end and no God. We'll move now to the second theme of hope.
And so we move to the next theme, which is hard to do because it's the theme of hope. There are people out there and organizations in the world who work for the betterment of people in countries where life is hard and unsafe. Our next speaker is Adrienne Wiebe, who has lived and worked with the people of Guatemala and who will talk about the group called Change for Children, who has fundraisers every year in Edmonton and goes to Guatemala personally to help set up schools and healthcare centers. Adrienne, please.
Good morning. My name is Adrienne Wiebe, as Reverend Aubrey said. I hope, can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay. Very difficult to follow that story with something about hope. But I would like to start with a poem by Emily Dickinson, who wrote about hope almost 200 years ago and wrote this poem. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without words and never stops at all. The quetzal bird is the national bird of Guatemala. There's a picture of one of these beautiful birds on the slide that you can see. It is a stunning bird with a long, colorful tail that lives in the cloud forests in the mountains of Guatemala. They're very elusive birds. I once walked for several hours in a forest before catching a glimpse of a tail of one of these birds. I have been told that the quetzal bird cannot survive in captivity. This bird dies if put in a cage. It can only survive and thrive living freely in the lush, misty forests of Guatemala. What a beautiful and yet sad image of hope for the people of Guatemala. The indigenous people of Guatemala, mostly Mayan peoples, have lived through several experiences of genocide. 500 years ago, Spanish colonization disseminated the indigenous population and destroyed their highly evolved culture and society. Centuries of repressive colonial rule followed. After independence from Spain in 1815, the Guatemalan society continued to be very oppressive towards the indigenous peoples. They were the bottom social rung and treated as disposable forced labor on plantations. After decades of military rule and armed conflict erupted in Guatemala in the 1980s, the Mayan people bore the brunt of the violence as they were suspected and accused of being insurgents. Hundreds of thousands of people were killed, and other hundreds of thousands were internally displaced or made refugees. 3/4 of these people were Mayan. During the 1980s, over 400 Mayan villages were massacred by military forces. These were civilian communities in which all the houses and fields were burned and all the inhabitants, including the children, were killed. Often the people were crowded into the village church and it was set on fire. Since the peace accords in 1996, the country has slowly begun to rebuild physically, socially, and psychologically. Despite continued racism, inequality, and poverty, the Mayan people of Guatemala cannot be caged or kept repressed. During the years that I've been involved in Guatemala since the mid-1990s until today, I have seen dramatic signs of hope. In the early 1990s, almost 100% of the teachers in the Mayan communities were from outside the community. They were Spanish speakers who could not speak the Mayan language. Today, Almost 100% of the teachers are Mayans, and they teach bilingually in Spanish and the Mayan language, and they work to build and maintain the pride in their culture. It's been a complete reversal. In the 1990s, the average level of education was primary school, if any. Today, at least half of the young people complete high school, and many are going on to university and to become professionals. In the early 1990s, the majority of the people traveled to the coast to work on sugar and coffee plantations, earning less than $1 a day. Today, one rarely sees trucks of migrant workers heading to the coast. Since the 1990s, the Indigenous peoples have begun to stand up against international corporations and outside forces intent on exploiting their land, including holding community referendums to reject mining in their communities and building local cooperatives to improve the sale of their agricultural produce. Change for Children is an Edmonton-based community development organization that accompanies and supports communities to increase food security, improve education, improve livelihoods, and strengthen cultural identity and equality. We continue to work with them. We've been working for more than 20 years in local community development, and now our partner organizations that we work with are managed by the young people. Well, they were young people when I knew them in the 1990s, and now they're the adults leading their communities to a better future. So truly, hope, like the quetzal bird in Guatemala, is a bird that cannot be caged, but rather finds a way to continue to live freely and to sing despite obstacles and suffering, and to create a better world of peace with justice.
Jessica has a song for us now.
So on the theme of hope, I have found a gospel song that I have never heard of. It's in our hymn book, actually. It's called We Shall Overcome. I just want to give a brief history because there is one man who hasn't been mentioned, Reverend Charles Albert Tindley. So the song originated from the hymn I'll Overcome Someday, written by this man in 1900. Reverend Charles Albert Tindley, he was a gospel music composer and American Methodist minister. He founded the largest Methodist congregation serving African American communities on the East Coast of the US. He was referred to as the Prince of Preachers due to his success. So it's a lovely song. It's been redone by multiple musicians throughout the years. It's very easy to follow along. Please sing along with me. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall walk hand in hand someday. We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace shall live in peace someday. Most important one, we shall all be free. We shall all be free. We shall all be free. We shall all be free someday. Oh, darling, deep in my heart, oh, I do believe we shall all be free someday. We are not afraid. We are not afraid. We are not afraid. We are not afraid. Oh, someday, darling, deep in my heart, I do believe we are not afraid today. We are not afraid today. Thank you, everyone.
The next segment of the service continues the theme of hope with Reverend Fulgence Ngijijama, who is a Burundi man who founded a UU church there. He was imprisoned for his activism and brought to Canada as a refugee under emergency measures, which I'm not even sure how they accomplished it, but the CUC did it. His family soon followed, and he now lives in Saskatoon. Following Reverend Fulgence, you will hear the final theme for the day, interconnectedness, with Rabbi David Kunin.
Hope is not just waiting, but hope is the work to transform things real for some into things real for all. In this meaning, hope is a form of active resistance. In my life and in my ministry, I have had the privilege to journey alongside people for whom the hope I'm working towards is real. The people on my journey, this particular group, they are not victims of police racial profiling. Their names do not raise red flags on their job applications. And they trust various public institutions to be there for them when they need them. And whenever I needed these people on my journey, they put their lives on the line. They use their resources, their connections, and yes, their skin color to help me get places and to help doors being open. To bring about the kind of hope I'm dreaming about, we need more of these people. We need more of these allies to take the risk, to be on the side of people who are hurting. And to all my friends and allies, especially those with privilege and power, I tell them we are in this for the long haul. This is a fight that has been going on for generations. and will probably go on for more time to come. I invite everyone to stay in the game with this simple but not simple invitation. Despite the discomfort, listen to the people who are screaming. Partake in their pain. We may gather valuable information and discover where it really hurts. Eventually, you will hopefully not ask what to do, because through listening, conversations, and relationships, choices become obvious. Do what you can, where you are, with what you have learned. Choices will probably include to unlearn prejudice towards certain groups, to challenge systems of injustice, to renounce power and control, to share resources, to challenge friends and family, and many other choices. Do the hard things the right way. Build a community, really. A community is a myth when people are selfish, when they look after only their interests. A community is a myth when a city or a country is divided between citizens and disposable human capitalist assets. We need to do our part. The arc of the universe does not just bend towards justice. And as one journalist recently wrote, nothing bends towards justice without us bending it. Faith communities, like the faith community we are part of, have an important role to play to bring about that change that we are all working towards. We have, as a faith community, principles and values that motivate us to do the right thing. I'm actually excited about the work ahead, because I believe that is where the seeds of hope are planted. That is where resistance awaits. That's where change will happen.
I say thank you to Reverend Fulgence Nagijimana, because here was the man who was a refugee from Burundi. His Unitarian congregation was driven out. He was jailed and tortured. Yet we have his words on the concept of hope and how powerful and how it moves us to examine where we stand in the line of responsibility and dedication to make changes. The words that in the video that drew me to his words were, hope is an act of resistance. How powerful. Words to contemplate in the concept of allies. Been hearing lately about the idea, who are we as white people to talk about being allies to the Indigenous people. And yet, Fulgence talks exactly about how without those of us who stand up, speak out, letter write, and do all those kinds of things, where would he have been today? He would have been dead. We were able to help because we cared. And it's not good for us to feel cautious about stepping forward as allies, because his words tell us there's no such thing as offending the one who needs help.
I want to talk quickly about a festival that was held every year, that's held every year in Nikko, not this year, sadly, but Nikko is a small community north of Tokyo, and it covers a wide neighborhood of communities, some richer, some poorer, some very high class, some very lower class areas, and they all come together every year for a festival. And the festival is amazing. Usually at a Japanese festival, you'll have carts, as you see in the picture, and every neighborhood will have a different cart, and they'll all compete. So you'll have really fancy ones and very simple ones, very fancy costumes and very simple costumes, and you can tell what are the rich neighborhoods and what are the poor neighborhoods. But in Nikko, they decided that every little community, and there are about 16, would have an identical float. So each community made an identical float. All the costumes are identical. And they parade through the town every year on 2 different days. And they end up at a beautiful shrine to celebrate the end of the festival. And then representatives from each of the little communities go to all of the other carts, and they bow and they offer words of greeting and congratulations. And what this festival really does is it unites the community, reminding them that whatever their socioeconomic class, they are all interconnected. They're equally important parts of the community of Nikko. And for me, that's what we need to remember as we think about ourselves as religious communities, that we're all part of a single community. We're part of the world, and that's something that's hard to remember in this time of COVID, but it's essential to remember. And I think for me, and this was where Audrey saw the blog that I had written, the coronavirus has served with tragic results as a reminder to us about our interconnectedness. If you think about it, nations have tried to close their borders, hoping to isolate themselves from the pandemic. And we can see how well that's worked. And like a steamroller, people, especially the elderly, in nation after, not only the elderly, but the poor as well, in nation after nation, have suffered the effects of this deadly virus. I would hope that the outcome of the pandemic would be a stronger sense of our global interconnection, but I don't see that happening. I don't see us connecting up, but instead I see a continuing sense of isolation. Cooperation doesn't seem to be what people are choosing. Instead, we close our borders and we reach towards hate. It's not only in Canada that people are prejudiced against Asians during this virus, but all across the globe, in Australia, in Japan, in the United States, everywhere, people are targeting others of different ethnicity because of the COVID virus. And if we think also of this in socioeconomic terms about the people that are hit hardest, people from the indigenous communities across the globe are being hit hard. If we try to separate out the virus and its effects from poverty and injustice, we can't do it because it's all one. Our sense of connectedness has to remind us that all of these issues are connected and that we have a responsibility as global society, as a global community, to try to bridge all of these differences and to try to remember that we're all connected. If we think about how even a simple thing like wearing a mask has become a political issue, we can see the tragedy of a failure of sense of responsibility. And that's what we need to reclaim, is a sense of interconnectedness, a sense of responsibility. I wear a mask not to protect myself, but rather to protect you. And that's even more important than protecting myself. Religions can be a uniting force in solving the problems of the world. We can bring hope at a time when people need hope the most. We can bring a sense of unity when people need unity the most. Yet often religions are self-serving ourselves. We offer answers that focus on our own political agendas. We often give answers that focus only on our own particular communities. And then we say, oh, we need our churches and synagogues and temples to reopen. We're so important, reminding or forgetting rather that people, when they gather together, are most threatened. So we need to find creative ways, instead of thinking that we're so important that we need to gather together. Zoom is a much better way to bring hope and comfort at a time when gathering is dangerous. We need to have a unity of purpose to join together in services like this. I remember Audrey's early services in her garden. They were amazingly powerful events. And this kind of service even more, as we reach across the globe, is an amazingly powerful event. It allows people from many different religious traditions to gather together to offer hope and comfort. And I think we need to continue to do this, to be strong, to remember that we are interconnected. And when we act together, when we act as human religions coming together to serve God and serve humankind, then I think we can't be defeated. Though we call upon God using many different names and looking God in many different ways, we need to remember our universal care for humanity and our universal care for the world in which we dwell. We need to be responsible to overcome the socioeconomic boundaries that divide us. We need to overcome the differences that drive us apart, and instead, as we celebrate our diversity, also point to a path of hope for the future of humanity, where we're built on a sense of interconnection and joint responsibility.
As Jessica extinguishes the chalice, let us read the closing words together. We have come together to share our deepest concerns, speaking and singing words of inspiration and hope. We have pledged to work for a more just world for ourselves and for the generations to come. Jessica has a closing hymn for us, One More Step.
Before we sing this last song, I just want to share with you that I have been able to have the most rewarding work. I'm very lucky to have helped people through music, and I was asked by Marilyn if I could spend some time with a new refugee family. So her mother and her beautiful 7-year-old daughter, they're Ugandan, but they came from Kenya. And it's been wonderful. She has taught me so much. And she says I've taught her so much. But she's the most humble child I have ever met. She finds beauty in everything. And she doesn't ask for anything. She's there to enjoy the world, and she enjoys the animals and the flowers, everything you see. She just finds it amazing. And I really think it's important that we mention her, and all the other refugees and everyone in the world. So I would like to sing the song with you called One More Step. I've never heard of it either, and so apparently this is one of the favorites. So please join me singing One More Step. One more step, we will take one more step, till there is peace for us and everyone will take one more step. One more word, one more word, we will take one more word, till every word is heard by everyone. We'll say one more word, one more prayer. We will say one more prayer, till every prayer is shared by everyone. We'll say one more prayer. One more song. Ready? Let me hear you. One more song. We will sing one more song, till every song is sung. Everyone will sing one more song. Let's take one more step again. Ready? One more step. We will take one more step, till there is peace for us and everyone will take one more step. Thank you, everyone. Wonderful.
Thank you to all who have attended the service today by Zoom or by YouTube. Goodbye to those who joined us by YouTube now as we end our live streaming. And for those of you on Zoom, please hang on. We'll take a short 30-second break before we open up for joys and sorrows from those of you who are still here. And then we will go into breakout rooms and have a general Zoom discussion.